kind of turn this thing over to David Hanna, the managing member of Paystubz, and let him take off and roll away with what he's got. Again, if you have any questions, you can try submitting them both through the question box or the chat box, and we should be able to see either one of those and go from there. So, David, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, George. Appreciate it. But no, thanks for taking the time. So what we're going to go through today is the pay period and the pay date and why it makes a big difference for efficiency for the back office in your credit union. But I'm going to, since we have kind of a smaller group, you're more than welcome to fire away with questions. And my email address is going to be showing on the screen here in a little bit, so I'm happy to follow up on the phone or via email after this as well. But we're based here in Rapid City, South Dakota. We have about 300 clients throughout North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and then some scattered outside of that area. But we've been in business for 12 years, and we deliver the Kronos Workforce Ready software to our clients and provide payroll services along with that. So with that, we've been around a lot of pay periods over the years. And so I wanted to go through a couple of things, and we see this to be a common thread through, I would say, a fair number of credit unions that we've either doing business with or have considered doing business with us, but they're in the middle of a pay period change. And I'll get into the meat of as to why that is and what we think seems to work best for a lot of different people. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and fire up the slides here. So according to the Fair Labor Standards Act, as an employer, you have to at least pay your people at least once a month. And so the common pay periods that revolve around that companies or credit unions might choose would be a weekly, a bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, semi-monthly, 2 times a month, or they pay their people once a month. With a lot of times semi-monthly and bi-weekly get conflated or confused by people, but bi-weekly being every 2, semi-monthly is 2 times a month. So with that, on these next slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each, and then we're going to get into what we generally would recommend to somebody if they're considering changing, as well as how do you go about making that change. So with that, for a weekly pay period, this would be paying your people 52 times a year. And say the pay period is that you're paying people for is, say, a Sunday through Saturday, and you pay them the following week sometime. So with that, some of the pros for this would be it's consistent, it's easier for people to remember. Overtime calculations are straightforward and simple, as well as employees, they usually like getting paid often, most people do. But some of the bad downside of it is you have to process payroll 52 times a year. And as well as you have to take it, that time is almost twice what it would be if you processed every 2 weeks. So there's that issue as well. And I keep losing my mouse here. Here we go. And one goofy little phenomenon related to leap years is on a weekly pay period, you may end up with 53 pay dates in a year, which happens generally speaking every 11 years. You run into the same issue on biweekly pay periods every 2 weeks, and you end up with 27 pay dates in a year versus 26. And I'll get into a little more of that here in a minute. And again, if you got any questions on these, feel free to throw them in there. So on a biweekly pay period, again, like the weekly, it's consistent, easy to remember. Overtime calculations are easy. Anybody who works over 40 hours in a 7-day window. And I'm a big fan of the weekly, bi-weekly concept because, in my opinion, it adds rhythm to the back office, meaning that I know as a responsible person for payroll that our pay dates are, say, every other Friday. I know that every other Tuesday I have to run payroll. Whereas if you're on a semi-monthly or monthly, you're paying on a date instead of a day in the pay period, or the pay date is. So then if the pay date happens to fall on a Tuesday, you realize, oh, shoot, I need to run payroll on a Friday when you might be planning on taking a long weekend. So yet one more reason why I've always liked biweekly pay period. One of the a little bit tougher parts, it's not generally a big deal, but if you accrue wages owed at the end of a calendar month for an accounting entry, that can end up being confusing to somebody who's responsible for that doesn't have a deep accounting background. And this is that accrued wage entry. So if the pay period straddles month end, you might have to accrue a liability on your accounting records for part of a pay period. But that gets into nerdy debit and credit stuff. But it's one downside to that is semi-monthly or monthly payroll helps cure this. And then your insurance deductions. Trying to reconcile insurance deductions with an invoice from, say, your health insurance provider, who generally bills on a monthly basis, but your pay period is every 2 weeks. And so over the course of a month, you may not have fully collected all the premium or the employee portion of the premium from everybody in the course of a calendar month, but you're getting billed monthly. So that reconciliation can be a little bit difficult. So what we've always recommended to clients that run a biweekly pay period is take your monthly premium times 12 and divide that by 24. And then only withhold those premiums from the employee on the first 2 scheduled pay dates in a month on a biweekly pay period. That way you still get the convenience of reconciling those deductions on a biweekly pay period to a monthly invoice and still get the benefits of the biweekly pay period. So, and then again, this 27 payrolls in a year, every 11 years. I won't get too deep into that, but if you're curious how best to handle that scenario, if you're on a biweekly pay period, let me know. I'd have to dive into the weeds a little bit and go outside the scope of this, but there are ways to help address this very comfortably. So on a semi-monthly pay period, you get paid twice a month. And the pay periods would generally be, say, from the 1st to the 15th of the month. The pay date is on, say, the 20th or 22nd. And then from the 16th to the last day in the month, paid on the 5th or the 7th of the following month is generally how we see a semi-monthly pay period work. There are other ways to adjust those dates, but that's a general gist of it. And because you're only getting paid twice a month, it matches up nicely a lot of times with people's personal financial needs for making loan payments, mortgages, rent, things like that. The insurance benefit reconciliation is a little easier. On a biweekly, it can be just as easy with that tip I mentioned a minute ago. And there's no payroll accrual entries for any nerdy accounting types listening to this. The overtime calculations can be really tricky and tough for people to understand on a semi-monthly pay period. And the reason for that is the pay period is going to be 14, 15, or 16 days. And it just varies depending on if it's a 30-day month, 31-day month, or February, with generally 28, but it happens to be 29 in 2020. And so calculating overtime, when overtime is on a 7-day work week, when you have a 15 or 16-day pay period, makes that really tricky. Our software handles it beautifully. But if you don't have software like that, overtime calculations can be really challenging. And then one other one, and we hear this one a lot, employees will wonder when is payday. So for instance, if the 15th is a regular payday and it's a Saturday, employees will go, hey, 15th is a Saturday, we get paid Friday or Monday, I never remember. That's a common point of confusion on semi-monthly and monthly pay periods. And so on the monthly pay cycle, pretty much the same thing as a semi-monthly, same pros, pretty much same cons, the overtime issue, and then pretty much the exact same challenges and some of the good sides. So that's a quick little overview of the different pay period options. And I'm not seeing any questions come through, but feel free to fire any away. And so after that, now we got to look at if we're considering the pay period and then you hear the term paying in arrears. Paying in arrears, well, what is that? If you're not around the accounting world, some people just don't know. But it's literally just the money that is owed and should have been paid earlier. That's the essence of paying in arrears. So what that means, their arrear period is the time between the end of the pay period and the pay date. So here internally at Paystubz, we pay every 2 weeks. Our pay period is a Sunday through Saturday, and we pay the following Friday. And so I don't even remember right now as we speak, but say the end of our pay period is this week Saturday. Our payday would be next week Friday. And so the arrearage period is next week, Sunday through Thursday. That's the period. And so the reason that arrear period is important, and we've seen a lot of credit unions over the years where they pay people on the last calendar day of the month for that month. They do not have an arrear period. So they don't give themselves hardly any time to sit back and collect records, make sure their timesheets are good, make sure any bonus or commission calculations are in good order, and give themselves time if the payroll person is sick or wants to be on vacation, because when payroll's got to run, it's got to run when you're not paying in arrears. You don't even get a day's grace. So that's why these arrear periods are really, really important when you're choosing a pay period and a pay date. And we recommend that there's at least 3 business days for your arrearage period. And then this is where I talk about paying on the last day of the pay period. It would require a person to estimate a person's time, because if, for instance, next week, Friday the 28th is the last banking day of the month, last business day of the month. And so if your pay period is for the entire month and you pay on the last day of the month, for instance, the 28th, now I've got to estimate my people's time on that Thursday and that Friday, because I'm probably processing payroll on Thursday the 27th for everybody to get paid on the 28th, and I have to guess or estimate their hours. Well, what happens if a person's sick that Friday, or if they suddenly say, I'm tired of this job, I'm going to quit, but now you've effectively paid them for a day when they're not even there anymore, not even working with you. So that's why having an arrearage period between the end of the pay period and the pay date is absolutely critical to having a good payroll process. It's one of the most foundational elements of it. So if you look at this and you think, we really need to change our pay periods. And so how do you go about doing that? Well, the federal government says you can, as a business, as an employer, you can change your pay periods whenever you would want, but you can't be changing them all the time just to mess with your own credit unions or business cash flow. But you can change them. But to change them in an orderly manner, it takes a little bit of planning, and probably a good 60 to 90 days of planning. And so here's what I mean by that. So first, you want to choose what your pay period and your pay date is going to be. First, start there. Know what you want to get to. So this is your end goal. So maybe your monthly pay period, and you think, we should be doing this every 2 weeks. It's going to make this, and this easier for us. And so you've chosen what your pay period and new pay date is going to be. Well, then you're going to want to take a look at the calendar and say, okay, if we're going to make this live, say July 1st or thereabout. So what would your normal pay period be trending into that, and what's your new one going to be? There's usually a transitional pay period from when you switch from the old one to the new one. And that transitional pay period might be a short pay period, where if you're going from monthly to biweekly, you might think that, well, because of the way the calendar works for when you want to go live, you're going to have a short 1 week pay period or something like that. And then you're going to get into the every 2 weeks from that point forward. So you're going to want to study the calendar and then work backward for your go live date. And then you need to communicate this to everybody. So when you change people's pay periods, you're going to change their own personal cash flow picture. So if I'm used to getting paid, say, once a month, and all of a sudden you're going to change me to biweekly, now I'm going to get paid a little more frequently, but I'm going to get paid less each time I do get paid, which in turn might mess up the way I have a loan payment on a car, my mortgage, my rent. It might mess up my own personal cash flow because of this. And that's okay. It probably will for a lot of your people. And it sounds daunting. And I've worked people through this process over the years, and it scares the heck out of them, the person in charge of making this change. But when it's done orderly, it can work pretty darn well. So my personal story is I left public accounting. I used to be a CPA, and I went to work with a client that had 350 employees, and they were in different hotels in Rapid City, South Dakota, and Deadwood, South Dakota. And I changed everybody's pay periods because we had some properties on semi-monthly, some were on biweekly. It was a little bit all over the place. I wanted to consolidate those pay periods and pay dates for more efficiency in our back office. Well, we planned ahead of time. and we gave everybody good notice. We had employee meetings to communicate what the change was going to be. And I had some people screaming at me. They weren't happy about the change because at the same time, we also mandated direct deposit. But during that process, we gave people ample time. I had to put up with some flack. So these last 2 points, offering a one-time pay advance and prepare for some naysayers. I couldn't speak long enough about these 2 things because we did offer a one-time pay advance for people when I worked through that change for real. And some people took advantage of it, some people didn't. They had to pay it back, of course, but they appreciated the chance to have a little grace in trying to bridge their own personal cash flow gap between their pay date changes. And then had some people say we were crazy, that what we were doing was illegal. We heard all kinds of reasons why we can't be doing this from employees. But we knew we were in the right, and we stuck to our guns. And once we got about 2 to 3 pay periods through that process, we found that everything got a lot easier. And I circled back personally to some of the people that screamed the loudest at me and asked them how everything was working for them personally. And I didn't have a single one that had a complaint after they had lived through 3 of the new pay periods and pay dates. So it can work, but you need to plan for it ahead of time and make a good choice out of the gate. Is what I would more than recommend. So with that, if you're listening to this and or reading what we've sent out here, what I've always recommended to people is choose a biweekly pay period unless there's a certain industry reason why you should do something different. But biweekly pay periods seem to work really well when managed properly. So if somebody is indifferent as to what they want, they say, well, what would you recommend? My off-the-cuff recommendation has always been biweekly, Sunday to Saturday. Treat the insurance deductions from employees for only the first 2 pay dates in the month, and that occasional time when there's a 3rd pay date in the month, they get a little more money because they already paid their insurance deductions in the first 2. And so a lot of times when there's that 3rd pay date in the month, people actually notice that and appreciate it. And paying on a Thursday versus a Friday. The reason that over the years I've become more, I've warmed to the idea of people paying on a Thursday. And the reason being is if there's ever a mistake, which with payroll, there's a lot of detail involved and mistakes do happen sometimes. But when there is, it gives you one more Fed Reserve banking day to get some money moved around to get somebody paid where maybe their money was shorted to them, or maybe an overpayment was made and gives you a reasonable window to get that money back. But paying on a Thursday gives you one more day of grace, because when you pay on a Friday and there's a mistake, even though there's the advent of same-day ACH capabilities today, that's kind of expensive to get some additional money to somebody that way. So this gives a little more comfort paying on a Thursday to give you that one more day of grace just in case you need it. Because going into a weekend, everybody usually wants to make darn sure they got paid at the end of the week they're supposed to. And then having 2 or 3 weekdays, this goes back to the arrearage suggestions earlier. And then the next one, so a few other considerations you might want to think through. And so you might be listening to this and you're thinking, I've triggered a few thoughts for you. So a couple of things internally to reflect on. How long does it really take you to from start to finish to process payroll? I've been around this for 12 years now, Paystubz has. And prior to that, I was a CPA and ran a management company for a bunch of hotels. But before that, when I was 13 years old, my parents owned a little restaurant, roasted chicken and cheeseburgers in Freeman, South Dakota. And I had to do the payroll with paper and pencil. And so I've got a really good idea of how long a payroll process should take for the person responsible for it. And so my general rule of thumb is for, say, a 50 employee group, the process for that person in charge of making sure people get the right money on the right day, it shouldn't take any more than 4 hours per pay period, or I called it a pay cycle here. And with software and service like ours, I've seen for a 50 employee group, this get down to less than an hour. But the general rule is, depending on your systems and your process, I can't see of any good reason why that should be outside 4 hours. And then the other question is, who is this person's backup in your organization, in your credit union? If you're the primary person, what if you get sick, you really need to go on a vacation, or you booked it and you weren't paying attention to your pay periods and there's nobody around to run payroll? We always encourage our clients to have a good quality backup person to cover for them. And then the other consideration to enhance your pay period process, no matter what software or what service you might choose to use, is how are you tracking people's time for your hourly people? How are they clocking in and out? Who's adding up hours if you're doing it manually? How are people submitting time off requests? How are you tracking your balances? Who approves those timesheets to make sure they're right? Things to consider to make sure you have good quality paydays. And then who pays your payroll taxes for you? Is that you, or do you maybe outsource that to an accounting firm or a service like ours? Who does that? And then what's the backup to that, just in case you need it? And then who gets your data to your retirement plan provider at the end of the pay period when pay date comes around, and when? And then once again, who else in your organization, in your credit union, knows how to do this as well? But these are kind of bigger, broader questions that revolve around the payroll process itself. But after being around this long, these are some of the core fundamentals that should be well thought out with good process and procedure, and have it reasonably well documented internally, so you could hand off your duties to somebody should they need to take your spot, or you get a promotion and somebody is going to replace you in your role.
Okay, Betty just had said that they did switch roughly 3 years ago from semi-monthly to bi-weekly, and it was a really good move for them. But maybe if you wanted to follow up on your previous 4 or 5 points too, is like, how can, other than recommendations, how can Paystubz assist in making some of those things easier? You know, like training someone in backup. And again, it's, if we could simplify the process, it makes it much easier to train somebody in, right?
Oh, yeah. In fact, some of our clients where, in smaller groups, it's hard to have another backup internally. We don't like to advertise that we're a true blue human backup for somebody. But when that's happened, where the primary person in charge of payroll at one of our clients is sick, or, and this is the time of year, they get a bad case of the flu and they're simply just not able to work. But then we get their boss or whoever that person is, and we verify that they are who they are. We will walk them literally one-to-one right through the payroll process, through the system. And so indirectly, we will function as that backup person when we have to in those emergent scenarios. And we've done it before, and we'll continue to do that. But with our timekeeping fully integrated into the payroll system, which is what we offer with just one employee database, the managers in our credit union clients, branch managers, they're in charge of editing and approving people's timesheets. And when those are done, getting to the point of reviewing payroll is literally, I'd have to count it, but I believe it's about 7 clicks with the mouse, and you're reviewing a payroll register and making any further edits that are needed. And so that's where using good quality software and service can take this 4 hours that I suggested here. And for a lot of our clients, when they really get rolling well with this, which takes about a month or two, that what was 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, it gets down to 1 or 2 hours. And we have a few clients where they're running through 80, 90 employees in a matter of an hour, and they're done and back to doing whatever it is they do otherwise. But the ability for employees to request time off through our software, track balances through our software, and us taking care of 100% of the payroll tax compliance work, these areas create a lot of efficiencies for our clients. And that's why they see value in what we do. One of our newest credit union clients, I was just on the phone with them yesterday, literally, and they started with us in January, their first pay date in January. The lady I was speaking with said, she goes, this used to take me probably almost 10 hours every 2 weeks. She said the last payroll literally took me probably 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. And that particular group has about 50 employees. And so they're already seeing a ton of efficiency just from the way our software is delivered and the way we deliver our service. But no, I actually did the math when I was putting this together, and that cumulatively in our office of 10 people here in Rapid City, we have over 70 years of cumulative experience in and around payroll, timekeeping, and HR software and service. And so we've seen a lot of different policies, procedures, methods, and work with clients through a lot of different scenarios. And for the way we've always rolled, we don't hard sell anyone. And we'd rather teach people or offer up ideas and suggestions for how to help them operate better. And we always want to earn their business. But if we don't, I honestly go to sleep easy knowing that literally just this, because I started our business to help people have a better day at work. And that's as sincere as it was 12 years ago. And but yeah, a little bit of insight about us. And then just a little bit more to summarize. This is a fancy little graphic our great marketing person, Josh Davis on the East Coast, put together for me. But it illustrates all the different components of the Kronos Workforce Ready software that we deliver to our clients. So it's always one employee database and one login to do one, some, or all of these different things. Our clients can pick and choose what they want to use. And just a little highlight that we don't view ourselves as a stereotypical toll-free national type provider. These are some quick stats from our 2018-2019 customer satisfaction surveys. And a little insight, we have right at about 300 clients that covers almost 12,000 employees. And those clients are primarily located in North and South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming.